Why did you choose to put such emphasis on Lil Baby, aside from the fact that he's pretty much the biggest star to emerge from Atlanta over the past however many years?
Honestly, like his mom was a huge part of it. When I met his mom and we had a really in-depth conversation, you know, she sat down with me. Lil Baby was pretty famous, but My Turn hadn't come out yet, so he wasn't like this superstar. And she said to me, she was like, you know, I asked Dominique, her son, you know, what do I tell him? And he said, tell him everything. And so she did, and she told me her whole life story. And it just connected with me on a human level. And I think Baby's another one where like I don't know if you've ever spoken with him, like he is so fucking smart. Like he's always a step ahead. He's always thinking, but because he's a Southern rapper, because he's, you know, a little bit shy, because he has this accent, you know, he speaks in a certain way. Like you might not realize right away, you know, how the wheels are turning or how much he's been through. But I think if you really listen to the music, it's in there. Right. And I think seeing him at certain moments, like disarmed, like I always talk about this one moment which happened late 2017. You know, My Dog was just blowing up, like his first single that went sort of national. And I was in the back seat of P's car, and we pulled up to Magic City at like 3 p.m. to like get some food, like just get some wings. And I was in the back seat, Baby was in the front seat, and P reached over into Baby's pockets and like pulled out this big stack of cash. And he was like, see, like this is why it's so hard to get him to focus, because like this is the money he can make in the streets every day. And he's not making this much money in music, but I'm telling him eventually he will. And I asked Baby, I was like, is this convincing to you? Like, does this work? And he was like, sometimes. Like, he was like, not really. He was like, I think he said, he was like, I believe it like 15% right now. And then he just went on this monologue where he's basically arguing with himself, and it ends one of the chapters, it ends one of the sections of the book, I think. And he's, you know, he's so conflicted, right? And he was open about how conflicted he was, and to see him like think in real time like that, it was like, it doesn't matter if he becomes the #1 selling rapper in the country. He's thinking about it on such a level, and he's going through something, and he's willing to, in glimpses, let me in to that process. And to me, that was enough to say, like, again, it doesn't matter what you think of Lil Baby. Like, hopefully this book works, whether or not you know who these guys are or care about their music. Like, right. It's a human story, and it's important because it's happening all over the place, right, in rap and outside of rap. Like these are creative people from tough circumstances trying to figure something out, right, and letting you in on that journey.
I felt like there was one scene that you described that you were around for, that if you had iPhone footage of it, it would have like 20 million views on YouTube. But it's basically like Lil Baby like reprimanding one of his friends for being on too many drugs.
So you know what's crazy? Yeah. I didn't even see that. That is online.
There is a clip of that.
There's a clip of that.
Oh,
like,
whoops.
That's how not like. There's so much. This is another reason I wanted to write the book, because there's so much rap ephemera out there. There's so much insane footage that of all of these famous people and non-famous people, but there's just there's too much content and people don't see it.
Right.
And when I saw that, it was something, again, these are guys I'd been around. These are people I'd met. I could name everybody in the video. I knew exactly where they were sitting. But it was only like passed around on local blogs. Maybe it's on YouTube somewhere. I don't even know. But someone needed to put all this shit in one place, because it's important. And there's another one that's mentioned in the book, again, that I wasn't there for, is Drake telling DJ Drama that Migos are going to be big.
Right.
That's on, there's like a DJ Drama vlog somewhere. I think, you know, it has like maybe like a couple thousand views. Right. Nobody's seen it, but it's from before Drake met Migos at Birthday Bash, and Drama's talking about who he's going to bring out on stage.
Right.
And he's like, oh, what about, like, someone's like, what about these guys, the Migos? And everyone's like, oh, like, don't let us down like that. Like, don't bring them out. Like, they suck. And Drake's like, no, I'm just telling you guys, like, this is a wave.
Really?
Like, this is a wave. And he's making the case for Migos pre-Versace.
Wow.
And this kind of shit is floating around out there.
Yeah.
And like maybe the super fans have seen it, but like it's not preserved for the history books, and that's why
I think about that all the time when there's just like a TikTok or a YouTube short of some interaction with rappers or somebody, you know, not shaking a hand with somebody else as they pass by each other, and it's just like, it's so interesting. It tells you so much about where they were at that moment in their life, and this shit is just completely lost in the ether, where like, how is anybody going to attempt to make sense of this 10 or 20 years from now?
And that's so much of rap history. Think about all the mixtapes that aren't available on streaming services. Think about all the YouTube videos that were on a random director's channel who then took it down because they got arrested or whatever it was. Like, there's just so much of rap history is ephemeral and has not been cataloged in a proper way. Like, there needs to be a million of these books. Like Chief Keef, Chicago Drill, you know, Memphis, 3 6 Mafia, the Dipset run you mentioned, you alluded to earlier. Like, none of this stuff is, and it's not that it only matters if like somebody writes about it in a hardcover book, but like, again, how are people going to access this stuff? Like, to me, one of the most important parts of my book is like the sources. Like, don't even read the book. Flip to the end and read every article, every YouTube video, every you know, comment section that's like cited in the back, because that stuff is important. Right.
But so what's the most recent time that you spent with Lil Baby?
I FaceTimed him. I did like an adapted excerpt from the book in the New York Times that came out on Sunday.
Is he like happy to see you?
About him and his mom. What's cool
you
about
spent that much time around each other?
Yeah, I mean, what's cool about Baby is like, he'll always remember that like I was there first, and I told him that I believed in him.
Right.
And like,
I can vouch for that if you sink your tentacles in early, that rappers
you're the king of that.
Will show you a lot of love in situations where if you meet them once they're already famous, they might just genuinely not give a fuck and let you know they don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I've told this story before, but I was interviewing one of his friends at the studio, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and I had been trying to get to his mom. This was before I interviewed his mom, but I knew I wanted to speak with her. And I finally ran into him. You know, he pulled up as I was pulling out, and he was like, "Oh man," and I'm like, "Oh, you've come such a long way." He was like, "It's so good to see you." Blah blah blah. Like he knew. You know, maybe he doesn't know my last name. He certainly might not know how to spell it, but like he knows my face, and he knows who I am and what I represent. And I was like, "Man, I'm really trying to get in touch with your mom. Will you please put her number on my phone?" And I handed him my phone, and you know, he's like, "Oh yeah, sure. Like, she'd love to talk to you, whatever." And then the next day I texted her. I'm like nervously waiting for her to text me back, you know, Mrs. Jones, like, this is so-and-so, I wrote about your son. And no response, you know, 12 hours, 15 hours. Finally, I get a text back, and it's like, no, this is Baby. Like, I'll put you on with her now.
Right.
So he felt comfortable enough that he put his number in my phone when that's not even what I was asking for.
Right.
And so that it's that kind of thing where I think, you know, in the same way that I appreciate him as a source, he appreciates me as somebody who has engaged with his work from the beginning. So I FaceTimed with him the week the album came out, maybe like 2 weeks ago now. And, you know, he was busy, but he always will give me the time because he knows that I was there.
But what differences do you see in his personality now that, like, you saw him when he was directly being like pulled back into doing crime and selling drugs, and now he's in a position where that would never be a consideration, but meanwhile his freedom and staying out of trouble and shit are definitely his biggest concerns. Like, you're even talking about at one point how, you know, he's rushing into the studio with a gun in his waistline, even though he's a felon, and he's not supposed to be carrying a gun.
And you see this online. Like, you see these guys on Instagram, you know, like clutching because they're that scared for their lives. And I think Baby seems comfortable. He's not my friend. I don't know him intimately, but I think you see more peace in someone like that, but it's also stressful. It's always stressful. And he said that to me. He said that to me in 2020. He said that to me in 2022. He's like, look, life's always going to be a struggle. It's not the same struggle that it was. I'm not struggling, you know, for my mother to pay her bills anymore, but like, people always want something from you. Like, I thought he was really eloquent in the times I've spoken to him about fame and about what that's like. And you know, you don't want to be the guy who's bitching about being rich and famous, but somebody's always wants something from you, and that's stressful.
Yeah, I mean, you point out a pretty good anecdote about what it's like to be a rapper or be around a rapper at a certain point in their career, where you've been to all the nicest stores and restaurants and clubs, and you've done essentially everything there is to do, so that this leaves very few things for a rapper to really pursue besides like the drugs that they're trying to get on a given day, maybe girls coming over, but even at a certain point, like most of the girls in town you've already met or whatever, and there's just this sort of monotony. And I know this feeling well, like being around rappers, and they have essentially the ability to do everything in the entire world, and they're aware of it, and they're flirting with the idea of doing it, but then in reality they're playing 2K on the couch.
All right, people, we just hit 300,000 subscribers. You know we're trying to hit 400,000 subscribers. So that little red button, tap it, tap in. Appreciate y'all.